If you're tired of overgiving, of shrinking yourself to be chosen, of feeling like love, peace, or abundance is something you have to earn, I want you to know this. You're not broken. You're just unpracticed in believing you matter. There is a way to live differently. And this is exactly why I created You Matter, an 8-week, soul deep course to help you remember your worth, reclaim your power, and rewrite every relationship in your life, starting with the one you have with yourself. Enrollment is now open. You can find more information on my website, www.lindsaymorlock.com. Come walk with me on this journey, and I'll show you how your worthiness was never up for debate. The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Guided Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and last time we talked about Sedona, and today I want to talk about what happened next on my journey. Because when I left Sedona, I didn't realize I was stepping into somewhat of a farewell tour. I just knew I needed comfort. My nervous system was fried. My soul was scorched. I was craving anything that felt like comfort, a warm bowl of chicken soup, a long hug from your friend. I just needed something familiar. I just knew I needed to get out of the barren house and out of the constant energy of the pressure cooker that was Sedona. So I flew back to New Jersey, back to my childhood home, back to the place that I had worked so hard to leave behind in pursuit of this new life, and yet now it felt like the softest place to land. And it was Mercury retrograde, of course, the kind of cosmic timing where everything old comes back up for reevaluation. So my time in Sedona was nearing the end, and the owner of the home I was renting had the house on the market, and it was likely to sell fairly soon. And while I intended to stay in Sedona until the closing, I found myself feeling complete with my time and energy there, and I really was looking for some respite. I needed to be able to let my hair down, to just breathe and take a beat from what my nervous system had just been through. So I didn't book a return ticket. I told myself I needed space, I needed time. But what I didn't expect was that this trip home would become a mirror for every codependent pattern that I hadn't wanted to yet see. Because I wasn't the same person who had left New Jersey only 6 months prior. But the people around me, once I got back to New Jersey, they still expected that version of me. And suddenly I could feel the dissonance in my body. I could see the performative giving, the ways I was expected to show up on demand, the places where I was supposed to be grateful just to be tolerated. People came out of the woodwork. People who hadn't reached out once during the time I was gone suddenly wanted to meet up. And I could feel the obligation creeping in within me, that pressure to say yes, to accommodate, to fix, to help. But I started paying attention to that. Who were the people who only wanted to connect when it was easy, when it served them and their needs? Who valued proximity over presence? Who disappeared when you stopped giving? This was a season in my life where I was starting to notice patterns. People showing up in ways that looked like connection, but it didn't quite feel like respect. For example, one person invited me to dinner and told me something that I later discovered was not true at all. For example, one person invited me to dinner, telling me information that I later discovered to be all lies. Another reached out only when they needed advice. Someone else disappeared the moment I asked for reciprocity. And then there was a situation where I was being asked to offer high-level support without pay, while this same person who was asking me to support them was compensating others freely for similar support. In all of it, I could feel the sting. not just of being used, but of realizing how much I had tolerated under the guise of love or closeness. This wasn't that. At times, some of this behavior didn't even feel like basic respect. And waking up to that reality was painful, but it was necessary. But I finally started to see where I was giving my time and energy. I started to see how much of my worth had been wrapped up in being needed, how often I gave from a place of fear, fear of not being enough, fear of being left, fear of disappointing people. I wasn't just giving. And when we give from those places, we aren't giving from a place of love. We are performing and pleasing to be loved. There was a moment I'll never forget where I found myself chasing after a garbage truck with a bag of trash in my hand, just trying to do one more helpful thing. And while I was running, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, hoping someone saw what I was doing. That's when it hit me. I wasn't doing it out of love. I was doing it to be seen. I was doing it to feel worthy. I was doing it to earn my keep. That bag of trash became a symbol that day, a symbol of all the ways that I was overextending, bleeding myself dry, and still kept asking, was that enough? Did I do enough? Do you see me now? That moment was an anchor for me. It was a clear line in the sand between true generosity and the kind of giving that's born from a worthiness wound. And the thing is, I love giving. I really do. It's part of my soul's blueprint. It's my essence. And when I'm aligned with why I'm giving, it brings me such joy. But when giving is tied to an outcome, when it's laced with attachment or performance, it leads to depletion. It leads to resentment. It leads to invisible contracts we never agree to. So I had to start asking myself, where am I giving to get? Where am I settling for breadcrumbs because I'm too afraid to ask for more? And I started noticing this pattern across many areas of my life. I began to see where I had allowed my own energy to shrink, where I lost my confidence, where I was staying silent, and where I was deferring to others' need for control. Someone I had supported deeply and very generously came to me asking for help, free strategic support. And I finally realized I had to draw a boundary. And I told them that if we were going to move forward, it would need to be through a professional agreement. And they responded with a short, got it, and then disappeared. No explanation, no conversation, just gone. And months later, they resurfaced as if nothing had happened. No acknowledgement of the boundary, the silence, just a casual return as though the space they left behind didn't matter. And that too is clarifying, right? Because when someone exits your life simply because you asked to be honored and returns without repair, their love or loyalty was never rooted in mutual respect, and your worth was never the issue to begin with. And I want to pause there because this wasn't just about them. It was about me. It was about the part of me that had allowed that pattern. That part of me that thought generosity meant I didn't get to ask for reciprocity. That part of me that feared I'd lose connection the moment I asked to be valued. And I saw the places where I was emotionally sidelined, where I overfunctioned to preserve peace, and where my truth had to be quiet in order to keep a dynamic from falling apart. These were connections that asked me to abandon parts of myself just to keep things smooth on the surface. And that's what New Jersey taught me. This wasn't just a visit. It was a clearing of the decks, a sacred goodbye to relationships that were rooted in performance, obligation, and imbalance. A letting go of places where I was giving to be chosen, where I was giving to feel like I mattered. And it hurt. Of course it did. I grieved. But I also had to get honest about my own participation. How had I allowed myself to stay in relationships like this because on some level, they fed my sense of self-worth? People weren't just taking advantage of me. I was allowing it because being needed made me feel valuable. Being useful made me feel like I mattered. And when you're a giver and you do enjoy giving and it genuinely brings you joy, that line of giving for joy and giving to get, that line gets blurry. Not all of your giving comes from an impure or an insincere place, but when it isn't reciprocated, it still hurts. And this is one of the hidden costs of unworthiness because we stay in relationships where we're not truly seen because part of us still believes we have to earn being chosen. When we don't believe we're inherently worthy, we chase love that requires us to prove it. And we call it loyalty when really it's longing. What I now know I want in relationships is real love, reciprocal love, emotional intimacy. Not just people who stick around when it's easy, but people who lean in when it's hard. People who are willing to do the work with me. And to be clear, it's possible. One of the most important relationships in my life right now is one that almost fell apart. We hit imbalance. We hit discomfort. But instead of avoiding it, we leaned in. We named what wasn't working. We dared to be honest. We dared to be real. And through that raw and vulnerable repair, we've created a relationship that's grounded in mutual respect and accountability and grace. It's not perfect, but it's real. And I deeply trust what we've built. And the more we lean in, the more emotional safety we create between us. And it's such a great thing. It's beautiful, truly. And that's what love gets to look like when two people are committed to truth and growth over the comfort of old dysfunctional patterns. But here's what I've also come to learn. The kind of intimacy we long for with others is really just an invitation to create that intimacy within ourselves first. We say we want closeness. We say we want to be seen. But how often are we even seeing ourselves? Can we witness our own motives without judgment? Can we sit with the discomfort of our own patterns without shame? Can we love ourselves enough to not abandon our truth for someone else's approval? Because intimacy starts within. And that's what this farewell tour showed me. That my overgiving wasn't just about them, it was about me, about the parts of me that didn't believe I could be loved for simply being me, about the parts of me that needed applause and approval to feel valuable. And so this wasn't just about setting boundaries in relationships with others. It was about learning how to set boundaries with the part of me that thought I had to perform to be enough. And I share this with you because if you're in a season like this, navigating grief, boundaries, the ache of letting go, a clearing of the decks of your relationships, I want you to know it's messy. And it also takes guts to do this work. That's why so many people walk away instead of leaning in. Because it's uncomfortable to confront your own patterns. And it's even more uncomfortable to face how others respond to you when you stop playing the role they've come to expect from you. It takes courage to change the rules. It takes courage to honor your truth, to be real, even when it costs you comfort or connection. Sometimes what you think is the dream turns out to be a complete test of your resolve. That's what this journey was for me. This season of life led me to the gift of my own becoming, delivered not in ease, but through rupture and heartbreak and the slow unraveling of who I thought I was. I know I'm really selling the spiritual path right now, but stay with me. Because becoming who you really are, that kind of birth isn't quiet. It breaks your heart wide open. So be gentle with yourself. Ask the hard questions. Make space for your grief. Let your no be clear. Let your yeses be slow. And trust that when you give from love, not fear, you're standing in your worth. And from that place, you don't need to prove anything. You just get to be. So until next time, protect your energy. Grieve what you've outgrown. And remember, the relationships worth keeping will never require you to abandon yourself to stay in them. So while I thought New Jersey was this farewell tour, while I truly believed I had cleared the decks of all the dysfunctional relationships in my life, that there couldn't possibly be any more left to unravel, I was actually wrong. And what I thought was the final goodbye to an old life and old patterns and old relationships turned out to be the doorway to something much deeper. So I spent about 6 weeks in New Jersey and eventually felt called to return to Arizona. And I believed I was stepping into a new beginning. And in some ways I was. Spirit had whispered that what was coming would bring me to my knees. I didn't know what that meant at the time. I thought maybe it would be a blessing. Maybe it's going to be some sort of breakthrough, maybe a wave of clarity. But what arrived was something much more humbling. A rupture that cracked open everything I thought I knew about myself. It was the kind of transformation that doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives through surrender, through the moments that literally shake your foundation just enough to help you remember who you really are. What I couldn't see then, but what's so clear to me now, is that this wasn't ever about arriving somewhere new. It was about unbecoming everything that wasn't me so I could finally come home to the truth within. This experience didn't break me to destroy me. It broke me open to restore me. It brought me face to face with the parts of myself that still believed I had to perform for love, that I had to abandon myself to belong, that I had to silence my truth to keep the peace. And slowly, layer by layer, I began to let those patterns go. So New Jersey wasn't the final chapter of letting go of these patterns. It was the foreshadowing, a preview of the deeper healing still to come. Because the real transformation didn't happen when I left or arrived somewhere. It happened when I chose to stay with myself. And that was the beginning of everything. The stories that came next, those are the ones I'll be sharing with you soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.